Admiral Kethros stared at the holographic display floating above his desk. The numbers made no sense. He had seen strange things in his 300 years of service to the Galactic Empire, but this was different. This was impossible. "Run the scan again," he ordered. His assistant, a young Vrin officer with pale blue skin, nodded quickly. "Yes, Admiral. Running fourth verification now." The sensor data appeared again. The same impossible readings. Energy signatures that violated every known law of physics. Temporal distortions that shouldn't exist anywhere in the galaxy. And all of it coming from one tiny, unremarkable solar system on the edge of Imperial space. Earth. Kethros felt a cold sensation creep down his spine. Humans. The species they had contacted just 6 months ago. The primitive newcomers who barely understood faster-than-light travel. Those humans had built something that terrified him. "Get me the Emperor," Kethros said quietly. "Right now." The holographic communication came alive minutes later. Emperor Valthrin Nive appeared, his ancient features showing mild annoyance at being disturbed. The Emperor had ruled for over 2,000 years. Very little surprised him anymore. "Admiral, this had better be important," the Emperor said. Kethros transmitted the data directly. He watched the Emperor's expression change from annoyance to confusion, then to something Kethros had never seen before. Fear. "Where is this coming from?" the Emperor asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Earth, Your Majesty. The human homeworld." The Emperor was silent for a long moment. His eyes, which had seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations, now showed an emotion that shocked Kethros. The most powerful being in the galaxy looked genuinely afraid. "Convene the High Council immediately," the Emperor said. "Tell no one else about this. If what I think is happening is actually happening, we may already be too late." The transmission ended. Kethros stood alone in his office looking at the data. He had fought in 12 wars. He had commanded fleets against hostile species. He had faced death without flinching. But now, looking at readings from a species the Empire had dismissed as insignificant, he felt something he had never felt before. Terror. On Earth, Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the control room of humanity's greatest achievement. Around her, dozens of scientists monitored screens filled with data. The mood was excited, almost giddy. They had no idea that across the galaxy their work had just caused a panic. "Energy levels are stable," reported Martinez from the power station. "Temporal field is holding at 98%, Sarah smiled. After 18 months of impossible work, countless failures and moments when she thought they would never succeed, the Kronos Gate was finally working. The massive ring structure floating in orbit above Earth was creating localized temporal distortions. They had actually done it. "How long until the test?" she asked. 30 minutes, someone called out. "All systems are green." Sarah looked through the observation window at the orbital construction. The Kronos Gate stretched 10 kilometers across, a ring of metal and energy that pulsed with strange light. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was humanity's door to understanding time itself. Her assistant, a young engineer named Jason Torres, came up beside her. "Dr. Chen, we're getting some strange readings from the outer system. Looks like sensor ghosts, but the pattern is unusual." "Probably just interference from the gate," Sarah said, not really paying attention. "We're bending space-time. Some weird readings are expected." Jason nodded but didn't look convinced. He went back to his station. Sarah turned her attention back to the gate. In 30 minutes, they would send the first probe through. Just a small jump forward in time. 5 minutes into the future. Nothing dramatic. But if it worked, it would change everything humanity understood about the universe. She thought about the meeting with Ambassador Webb yesterday. He had seemed distracted, worried about something. The Empire had been acting strange lately, requesting odd information about human research projects. Sarah had dismissed it as typical bureaucratic nonsense. She wished she had paid more attention. 300 light-years away, the High Council of the Galactic Empire gathered in emergency session. Representatives from 100 species filled the Grand Chamber on Throne Prime, the capital world. None of them had been told why they were summoned. The secrecy itself was unusual enough to cause whispers of concern. Emperor Valthrin IX entered, and the chamber fell silent. The ancient ruler moved slowly to his throne, his expression grim. "We face a threat," he began, his voice amplified to reach every corner of the vast room, a threat I had hoped never to see again in my lifetime. He transmitted the sensor data to every council member. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. Impossible! The readings must be wrong. No species has achieved this in 50,000 years. The Emperor raised his hand for silence. The readings are correct. We have verified them multiple times. A species we contacted only 6 months ago has somehow managed to break the cascade limitation. An elderly council member, a being made of crystalline structures, spoke up. Her voice was like chiming bells. Your Majesty, with respect, the humans are barely capable of basic FTL travel. How could they possibly? I don't know, the Emperor interrupted. But they have. And if you've studied your history, you know what this means. The chamber fell silent. Every being there had learned about the precursors in their youth. The ancient race that had developed temporal technology 100,000 years ago. The species that had nearly destroyed the entire galaxy before they were finally stopped. The precursors started the same way. The Emperor continued. Small experiments. Temporal distortions. They claimed it was for research, for exploration. Within a century, they were erasing entire civilizations from the timeline, creating paradoxes that tore holes in reality itself. Star systems simply ceased to exist. Species that had lived for millions of years were suddenly never there at all. The war that followed nearly ended everything, added Admiral Kethros, who had been given permission to address the council. The surviving species formed this empire specifically to ensure temporal technology would never be developed again. We've enforced that law for 100,000 years. And now these humans, the crystalline being said slowly, have broken it in 18 months. The Emperor nodded. We need to decide how to respond quickly. A fierce debate erupted. Some council members demanded immediate military action. Others argued for diplomacy. A few suggested trying to understand how humans had achieved what the Empire's best scientists had failed to do for 20 millennia. We should destroy them. Now, growled a representative from a warrior species, before they become the next precursors. We don't know that they will, countered another. Perhaps we should communicate our concerns first, and give them time to advance their technology further. Are you mad? The Emperor listened to the arguments, his expression unreadable. Finally, he made his decision. We will observe first, he said. Admiral Kethros, send your best stealth fleet to the Sol system. I want complete surveillance of this Chronos Gate. Find out everything you can about how it works and what the humans intend to do with it. And if they continue their experiments? Kethros asked. The Emperor's eyes were hard. Then we will do what we must to protect the galaxy, even if it means wiping out an entire species. Back on Earth, Sarah Chen watched the countdown reach 0. The Chronos Gate activated with a brilliant flash of light. Energy readings spiked. The temporal field expanded. The probe disappeared. For 5 minutes, everyone held their breath. Then, exactly when predicted, the probe reappeared. It had successfully traveled 5 minutes into the future. The control room erupted in cheers. Scientists hugged each other. Someone popped open champagne. Sarah felt tears of joy running down her face. Humanity had just achieved the impossible. They had no idea they had also just signed their own death warrant. In the outer solar system, invisible to human sensors, 6 Imperial stealth ships watched and recorded everything. Captain Lyria, the fleet's intelligence officer, studied the data with growing disbelief. How? She whispered to herself. How did they do this? She had studied human culture during the first contact. They seemed creative but chaotic, advanced in some ways, primitive in others. Nothing about them suggested they could achieve something the Empire had been trying to do for 20,000 years. Yet they had. Lyria began her report to Admiral Kethros, knowing that what she wrote might determine the fate of an entire species. She chose her words carefully, trying to be objective, trying to give the humans a chance. But deep down, she feared it was already too late. The Empire didn't forgive those who played with time. Captain Lyria had been watching humans for 3 weeks now. Her stealth ship floated in the darkness beyond Neptune's orbit, completely invisible to Earth's primitive sensors. Every day, she understood less about what she was seeing. The Chronos Gate was active almost constantly. Humans sent probes through it, each one traveling further into the future than the last. First minutes, then hours, then days. The temporal jumps were getting bigger and the technology was getting more stable. What confused Lyria wasn't just that humans had succeeded. It was how they had done it. She reviewed the intercepted communications again. Human scientists didn't work like Imperial researchers. They didn't follow rigid protocols. They didn't separate their disciplines. In one meeting recording, she watched physicists arguing with philosophers about the ethics of time travel, while an artist drew diagrams on a whiteboard. It was chaos. Complete beautiful chaos. And somehow it worked. Captain, her second officer, called out. We've intercepted another interesting transmission. It's from their lead scientist to someone at a place called the Ethics Committee. Lyria pulled up the message. Dr. Sarah Chen was discussing whether time travel could be used safely. She wasn't asking permission. She was genuinely trying to understand the moral implications of what they had built. The Empire had never done that. Imperial scientists built weapons first and worried about consequences later. But humans seemed to be worried about consequences from the very beginning. Lyria began writing her daily report to Admiral Kethros, choosing her words carefully. She knew the Admiral was under pressure from the war faction to recommend immediate action. But something about these humans made her hesitate. Meanwhile, on Throne Prime, the Imperial Historical Archive was in chaos. Dozens of researchers poured through old records, searching for anything about the precursors. Emperor Valthrin Nive had ordered a complete review of everything they knew about the ancient species. Professor Zenthar, the Empire's leading historian, finally found what he was looking for. The file was 100,000 years old, barely readable even with modern technology. It described the precursors' first experiments with temporal manipulation. His blood ran cold as he read the precursors had taken 60 years to achieve what humans did in 18 months. He transmitted his findings to the Emperor immediately. Within minutes, he was summoned to the throne room. Explain this, the Emperor demanded, gesturing at the data. How is this possible? Professor Zenthar, who had never been nervous in his 3-century career, found his hands shaking. Your Majesty, I've been reviewing human scientific publications. They approach research completely differently than we do. Explain. The Empire's research institutions are specialized. Our physicists work with other physicists. Our engineers work with engineers. We have strict methodologies, peer review processes that take years, and we never cross disciplinary boundaries. The Emperor nodded. That's the proper way to conduct research. Yes, Your Majesty. But humans don't do that. They mix everything together. Their temporal research team includes quantum physicists, philosophers, artists, computer programmers, even a poet. They have something they call brainstorming sessions where they just throw ideas at each other, no matter how crazy. That sounds like madness. It is, Your Majesty. It's complete chaos. And somehow it generates insights we would never discover. They make connections between concepts we would never think to connect. The Emperor was quiet for a long moment. Are you telling me that humans achieved in 18 months what we couldn't do in 20,000 years because they're disorganized? Not disorganized, Your Majesty. Differently organized. They embrace chaos in a way we never learned to do. The Emperor dismissed the professor and sat alone in his throne room, thinking. He had ruled for over 2,000 years. He had seen species rise and fall. He had witnessed wars, plagues, and disasters. But he had never encountered a problem quite like this. The humans were dangerous not because they were aggressive. They were dangerous because they thought in ways the Empire didn't understand. Back on Earth, Sarah Chen was having a terrible day. Ambassador Webb had just left her office after delivering the most confusing message she had ever received. The Empire wants us to slow down our research, Sarah repeated, still not quite believing it. They won't explain why. They just want us to stop. Her team gathered around the conference table, equally confused. That makes no sense, said Martinez. First contact went well. They seemed happy to share technology with us. Why would they suddenly be worried about our research? Maybe they want to keep advanced tech for themselves, suggested Jason Torres. Make sure we stay dependent on them. Sarah shook her head. I don't think that's it. Webb said they seemed scared. He couldn't explain why, but he said the Emperor himself is involved. The Emperor? Someone gasped. The ruler of 100 species is personally worried about our little time dilation experiments. That's what doesn't make sense, Sarah said. We're not building weapons. We're not trying to conquer anyone. We're just trying to understand how time works. She pulled up their latest results on the screen. Look at this. Yesterday we sent a probe 96 hours into the future. When it came back, it brought readings of solar activity that won't happen for 4 days. We can verify the accuracy when the time comes, but preliminary analysis suggests we're really seeing the future. It's incredible, breathed Martinez. We're actually doing it. And apparently that terrifies the most powerful empire in the galaxy, Sarah said quietly. I want to know why. She opened her computer and started searching through the empire's public database. Most of it was locked to humans, but they had been given access to basic historical records. She searched for anything related to temporal technology, time travel, or time manipulation. Most results came back empty. It was as if the Empire had deliberately erased information about the topic. Finally, she found a single reference. A footnote in a history book about something called the Precursor Wars. The text was brief and vague, mentioning an ancient conflict over dangerous technology that had threatened the galaxy 100,000 years ago. Jason, she called out. Come look at this. Jason read over her shoulder. The Precursor Wars? Who were the precursors? I don't know, but I think we need to find out. In her stealth ship, Captain Lyria watched as human ships began moving toward the Kronos Gate with new equipment. Her sensors analyzed the cargo. It looked like they were preparing for something big. She contacted her communications specialist. Can we intercept their internal planning documents? Already done, Captain. Transmitting to your station now. Lyria read through the files. Humans were planning to send something larger through the gate. Not a probe this time. They were building a capsule that could carry supplies, equipment, and possibly even people. Her heart sank. This was exactly what the war faction had warned about. Humans weren't going to stop at small experiments. They were going to keep pushing, keep advancing until they could do what the precursors had done. Unless they were stopped. She encoded her report with heavy encryption and sent it directly to Admiral Kethros. Then she added something she had never put in an official report before, a personal note. Admiral, I recommend we make contact before taking military action. These humans are not the precursors. They think differently. They might listen to reason if we explain the danger. But if we attack without warning, we might create the very enemy we fear. She sent the message and waited. Knowing that her career might be over for suggesting mercy, Admiral Kethros received the report in his office. He read it 3 times along with Captain Lyria's personal note. Then he read the latest recommendation from the High Council's war faction. They wanted him to prepare for immediate military intervention. Full planetary blockade. Possible orbital bombardment if humans refuse to shut down the gate. He looked at both options and made his decision. Prepare the fleet, he ordered his staff. We move into Earth's solar system in 48 hours. What are our rules of engagement, Admiral? His tactical officer asked. Kethros hesitated. He thought about Captain Lyria's note. He thought about the human scientists who had somehow achieved the impossible through chaos and creativity. He thought about the Emperor's fear and the Council's paranoia. We offer them one chance, he said finally. One chance to shut down their research voluntarily. If they refuse, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. On Earth, Sarah Chen finally found something useful in the Imperial database. A deleted file that had been poorly erased, still partially readable. It mentioned the precursors and their temporal experiments. It described how they had used time manipulation to try to erase rival species from existence. It explained why the Galactic Empire had been formed in the first place. Sarah felt sick to her stomach. She understood now. The Empire wasn't afraid of human weapons. They were afraid of human curiosity. They thought humans would become the next precursors. She called Ambassador Webb immediately. We have a problem, she said. A really big problem, but it was already too late. In the outer solar system, Admiral Kethros's fleet dropped out of stealth mode. 300 warships suddenly appeared on every human sensor screen in the solar system. The Galactic Empire had arrived, and they had not come to talk. The alarms screamed through every human space station, ship, and orbital platform. 300 Imperial warships had just materialized in Earth's solar system, and they were moving into attack formation. Sarah Chen stood frozen in the Kronos Gate control room, watching the tactical display. Every ship was painted red on the screen. Every single one was larger and more advanced than anything humanity had ever built. They're hailing us, the communication officer said, his voice shaking. Priority Alpha. They're demanding we connect them directly to you, Dr. Chen. Sarah's hands trembled as she accepted the connection. The hologram that appeared was a tall alien with pale blue skin and eyes that looked ancient and tired. "I am Admiral Kethros of the Galactic Imperial Fleet," the alien said. His voice was cold, formal. "You are Dr. Sarah Chen, lead scientist of the Kronos Gate project." "Yes," Sarah managed to say. "Admiral, what's happening? Why are your ships here?" "You will shut down the Kronos Gate immediately," Kethros said. "You will destroy all research related to temporal manipulation. You will surrender all data and equipment to Imperial custody." "What? We can't just— These are not requests, Dr. Chen. These are demands. You have 24 hours to comply. If you refuse, we will use force." The hologram disappeared before Sarah could respond. The control room erupted in chaos. Scientists shouted questions. Alarms continued blaring. Someone was crying. Sarah stood in the middle of it all, her mind racing. "Get me Ambassador Webb," she ordered. "Right now." Marcus Webb was already on his way. The ambassador had been preparing for this moment since he received the first cryptic warnings from Imperial contacts weeks ago. He just hadn't expected it to happen so fast. He arrived at the control room 20 minutes later, slightly out of breath. "I saw the fleet," he said. "Sarah, we need to talk. Privately." They moved to Sarah's office. Webb pulled up the files he had been collecting. The pieces of information he had been trying to put together. "The Empire is terrified of temporal technology," he explained. 100,000 years ago, a species called the Precursors developed similar technology. They used it to wage war. They erased entire civilizations from the timeline, created paradoxes that nearly destroyed the galaxy. Sarah felt like she couldn't breathe. "We're not trying to weaponize anything. We're just researching." "They don't care," Webb interrupted. "They think all temporal research leads to the same place. They think you'll become the next Precursors. That's insane." "Is it?" Webb asked quietly. "Sarah, you've achieved in 18 months what their scientists couldn't do in 20,000 years. You've broken laws of physics they thought were absolute. Can you really blame them for being scared?" Sarah slumped in her chair. "What do we do?" "I don't know," Webb admitted. "But we have 24 hours to figure it out." On the Imperial flagship, Admiral Kethros sat in his command chamber, reviewing the human response. Or rather, the lack of response. So far, humans had only sent diplomatic requests for more time and more explanation. Captain Lyria appeared on his communication screen. "Admiral, I'm receiving reports from my infiltration team. Human scientists are not preparing to shut down the gate. They're arguing about what to do." "Arguing?" Kethros asked, surprised. "Their planet is under siege and they're arguing?" "Apparently debate is central to their culture," Lyria said. "They won't make a decision until they've heard all perspectives." Kethros felt a headache forming. "That's the most inefficient decision-making process I've ever heard of." "Yes, Admiral. But it's also why they made the breakthrough we couldn't. They consider ideas we would dismiss immediately." Kethros studied his intelligence officer. "Captain, you sound like you're defending them." Lyria hesitated. "Permission to speak freely, Admiral?" "Granted. I've been watching these humans for weeks. They're not the Precursors. They're not trying to build weapons. They're trying to understand the universe. They integrated ethics into their research from day one. They're constantly asking themselves if they should do something, not just if they can." "The Precursors probably said the same thing at the beginning," Kethros replied. "Maybe," Lyria acknowledged. "But Admiral, what if we're wrong? What if destroying them creates the very threat we fear? What if the galaxy needs what they've discovered?" Kethros wanted to believe her. But he had his orders, and he had his duty to protect the galaxy even from itself. "Your concerns are noted, Captain," he said formally. "But unless humans comply with our demands, we will proceed as planned." The connection ended. Lyria sat alone in her ship, feeling helpless. Back on Earth, Sarah's team had assembled an emergency session. Every major scientist involved with the Kronos Gate was there, either in person or via hologram. Ambassador Webb sat quietly in the corner listening. "We can't destroy our research," argued Dr. Patel, the head of theoretical physics. "This is the greatest scientific discovery in human history." "They'll destroy us if we don't," countered Martinez. 300 warships, people. We can't fight that." "We shouldn't have to fight," said Professor Williams, the team's ethics advisor. "We should explain. Make them understand we're not a threat." "We've been trying to explain for weeks," Webb interjected. "They're not listening." Jason Torres, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. Dr. Chen, I've been analyzing our research process. I think I understand why we succeeded where the Empire failed. Everyone turned to look at him. Go on, Sarah encouraged. It's about how we think. The Empire's scientists work in rigid hierarchies, strict specializations. But we mixed everything together. We had physicists talking to philosophers, engineers working with artists. We approached time as both a scientific problem and an ethical question simultaneously. What's your point? Martinez asked. My point is that the difference isn't in our technology, it's in our thinking. And that's something the Empire can't just copy or steal. It's fundamental to who we are as a species. Sarah sat up straighter. An idea was forming. Jason, you might have just solved our problem. What do you mean? Sarah stood and began pacing. They're afraid we'll become the precursors. But we're not the precursors. We think differently. We approach the universe differently. What if we could prove that to them? How? Webb asked. Sarah pulled up the Chronos Gate schematics. We show them how we did it. We open our research completely. Let them see our ethics committees, our philosophical debates, our collaborative process. We show them that our success came from responsibility, not just capability. They might just use that information to replicate our work, warned Dr. Patel. Let them try, Sarah said. If we're right about why we succeeded, they won't be able to duplicate it without changing their entire culture. And if they're willing to do that, maybe they won't need to fear us anymore. Webb shook his head. That's a huge gamble, Sarah. So is fighting a war we can't win, Sarah replied. Ambassador, can you get me a direct line to Admiral Kethros? Probably. But are you sure about this? Sarah looked around at her team. Scared faces, brilliant minds. People who had worked together not because they were ordered to, but because they wanted to understand the universe. Yes, she said, I'm sure. Admiral Kethros was surprised when he received the direct communication request from Dr. Chen. He almost dismissed it, but Captain Lyria's words echoed in his mind. Maybe humans did deserve a chance to explain. He accepted the call. Sarah appeared on his screen, looking tired but determined. Admiral, I want to offer you something. Complete access to our research. Everything. Our methods, our data, our ethical frameworks. I want to show you why we're not the precursors. Kethros was taken aback. You're offering to surrender your research? I'm offering to share it, Sarah corrected. There's a difference. Surrender implies you're taking it from us. Sharing means we're giving it freely, with understanding. And what do you expect in return? Time, Sarah said simply. Time to show you who we are. Time to prove we can be trusted with this technology. Kethros considered. It was unorthodox. The High Council would probably disapprove, but something about the human's earnest expression, the way she spoke about sharing rather than surrendering, made him curious. You have 12 hours, he said finally. Show me why you're different. Thank you, Admiral, Sarah said. You won't regret this. The connection ended. Kethros sat back, wondering if he had just made the biggest mistake of his career. On Earth, Sarah's team worked frantically. They compiled everything. Research notes, failed experiments, ethical debates, collaborative brainstorming sessions. They included the arguments, the disagreements, the times they stopped experiments because they weren't sure if they should continue. They showed the messy, chaotic, beautiful process of human discovery. Jason Torres supervised the compilation, making sure it told the complete story. This is going to show them everything we are, he said to Sarah. Good and bad. That's the point, Sarah replied. If they're going to judge us, let them judge us accurately. As the deadline approached, Sarah transmitted the complete package to Admiral Kethros. Terabytes of data, months of work, the entire story of how humanity had achieved the impossible. Then they waited. Kethros reviewed the data with growing astonishment. He called in Captain Lyria and several scientific advisors. They pored over the information for hours. The deadline passed. 300 Imperial warships remained in attack formation around Earth, but they did not fire. Sarah Chen stood in the control room, watching the tactical display with exhausted eyes. She hadn't slept in 36 hours. None of them had. Why aren't they shooting? Martinez whispered. Maybe they're reading our data, Jason Torres suggested hopefully. Maybe they're actually considering it. Ambassador Webb was on constant communication with his Imperial contacts, but no one would tell him anything. The Empire had gone completely silent. "This waiting is worse than fighting," muttered Dr. Patel. Sarah agreed. But what choice did they have? They had gambled everything on the hope that the Empire could be reasoned with. Now they just had to wait and see if the gamble paid off. On the Imperial flagship, Admiral Kethros was in the middle of the most important conversation of his life. Emperor Valthrin Nida's hologram filled his command chamber, and the ancient ruler's expression was unreadable. "You're recommending we do nothing?" the Emperor asked. "Not nothing, Your Majesty," Kethros replied carefully. "I'm recommending we reconsider our approach. The human research I've reviewed is unlike anything I've ever seen. They're not following the precursor path. They're creating something entirely new. And you believe this based on a few data files they shared with you?" "I believe it based on 3 weeks of direct observation, Your Majesty. Captain Lyria's reports are consistent. Human innovation comes from chaos. From mixing disciplines we keep strictly separated. They achieve breakthroughs because they think in ways we've forgotten how to think." The Emperor was silent for a long moment. "You sound like Professor Zenthar." He said something similar. "Then perhaps we should listen, Your Majesty." "What if destroying Earth means losing something the galaxy needs?" "Or," the Emperor countered, "what if sparing them means creating the next great catastrophe?" It was the question neither of them could answer with certainty. Before Kethros could respond, alarms suddenly blared across the flagship. His tactical officer shouted, "Admiral, energy spike from the Chronos Gate, massive temporal distortion forming." Kethros spun to his screens. The gate was activating, creating a temporal field larger than anything they had recorded before. "Are they attacking?" demanded the Emperor. "No, Your Majesty, I don't know what they're doing." On Earth, Sarah's team was experiencing the same confusion. The Chronos Gate was active, but no one had initiated a test. "Someone shut it down," Sarah shouted. "We're trying," responded the engineering team. "Controls aren't responding. The gate is operating on its own." "That's impossible," Sarah said. But even as she spoke, she knew it wasn't impossible. It was just something they hadn't predicted. The temporal field expanded, crackling with energies that made their instruments scream. And then something stepped through. A person, an old woman with gray hair and familiar features, walked out of the temporal distortion. She wore a version of the control room uniform, but weathered and old. She looked around the room with eyes that had seen decades Sarah hadn't lived yet. "Hello, Sarah," the old woman said. "I know this is confusing, but I'm you. From 50 years in the future." Sarah felt the room spin. Around her, her team stood frozen in shock. That's impossible," Sarah whispered. "The gate can only send things forward, not back." "It took me 40 years to figure out how to reverse the field," her future self said. She looked exhausted, like she had been traveling for a very long time. "And I only got one shot at this. One chance to come back and fix everything." "Fix what?" The old woman's expression was pained. "In my timeline, the Empire destroyed Earth. They bombarded our cities from orbit 3 hours from now. Billions died. The Chronos Gate was destroyed." Sarah felt sick. "Then why are we still here? Why hasn't that happened?" "Because I changed something," her future self said. "By coming back, I've already altered the timeline, but we don't have much time. I need to speak with the Emperor. I need to show him what happens if he makes the wrong choice." Admiral Kethros was already transmitting the impossible scene to Emperor Valthrin IX. The old human woman had somehow traveled backward in time, something that should violate every known law of physics. "Your Majesty," Kethros said, his voice shaking slightly, "the humans have achieved backward temporal displacement. This is beyond even what the precursors managed." "Get that woman on communication," the Emperor ordered. "Now." Within minutes, a 3-way holographic conference connected the Emperor, Admiral Kethros, and the elderly doctor. Chinchu present-day Sarah stood beside her future self, still trying to process what was happening. "I am Emperor Valthrin IX, the ancient ruler said. "Explain yourself." The old woman straightened, despite her obvious exhaustion. "Your Majesty," I come from a timeline where you made the decision to destroy Earth. I understand why you did it. You were afraid. Your fear was not unreasonable. Then you understand why we must act, the Emperor said. I understand why you think you must act, the old woman corrected gently. But Your Majesty, I've lived through the consequences. After Earth was destroyed, the galaxy faced something you didn't predict. 200 years from now, a natural temporal anomaly will emerge from the galactic core. It will threaten every inhabited world in the Empire. The Emperor's expression remained stern. We will deal with that when it comes. You can't, the old woman said flatly. I've seen it. Your scientists spent decades trying to counter it. They failed. The only solution required the temporal manipulation techniques that humans developed, the very techniques you destroyed when you destroyed Earth. She pulled out a data device. I brought proof, star charts, mathematical models, sensor readings from the anomaly. Everything you need to verify what I'm telling you. Admiral Kethros received the data transmission and immediately forwarded it to the Imperial Science Division. While they waited, the old woman continued. Your Majesty, I spent the last 40 years of my life trying to recreate the temporal displacement field that could send me back to this moment. I had to work alone, because all the other brilliant minds who could have helped me died when Earth died. The collaborative, chaotic, beautiful way humans think about science died with them. You managed alone, the Emperor observed. Barely, and far too late. In my timeline, billions died from the temporal anomaly before I finally managed to reverse time and come back here. I'm trying to save them. I'm trying to save everyone. Present-day Sarah spoke up. If you've changed the timeline by coming back, doesn't that mean your future doesn't exist anymore? Her future self smiled sadly. That's the hope, isn't it? That by coming back, I've erased my own timeline. All those deaths, all that suffering, all those years of lonely research in the ruins of human civilization. If I succeed here, none of it will have happened. You're trying to erase yourself from existence, Kethros said with dawning understanding. I'm trying to save the galaxy, the old woman replied. If that means I never exist, so be it. Emperor Valthrin IX was silent, studying the elderly human woman. He had ruled for 2,000 years. He had seen countless beings sacrifice themselves for others. But something about this woman's calm acceptance of her own erasure touched something deep in his ancient heart. The Science Division confirms your data appears authentic, he said finally. The temporal anomaly you describe is theoretically possible. It's not theoretical in my timeline, Your Majesty. It's very, very real. The Emperor closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, he looked older than Kethros had ever seen him. I have spent 100,000 years enforcing a law designed to prevent another catastrophe like the Precursor Wars, the Emperor said quietly. But perhaps I have been fighting the last war instead of preparing for the next one. Your Majesty, Kethros asked, uncertain. Admiral, stand down your fleet. Dr. Chen, both of you, I need time to consult with the High Council, but I will tell you this. Your people have shown courage, creativity, and sacrifice. Perhaps those qualities matter more than we have given them credit for. The old woman swayed suddenly, and present-day Sarah caught her. Thank you, Your Majesty, the elderly version whispered. I don't know how much longer I have. The temporal displacement is difficult on the human body. Get her medical attention, the Emperor ordered. Admiral, make sure she receives the best care we can provide. As the connection ended, the old woman looked at her younger self. I need to tell you something. The temporal displacement field, the one that brought me here, it's killing me. I knew it would. That's why I only had one chance. No, Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. We can save you. We can... You can't, her future self interrupted gently. And that's okay. I've lived a full life, even if it was in a dark timeline. Now I've done what I needed to do. I've given you all a chance. She reached out and touched young Sarah's face. Be brave. Be curious. Keep asking the questions others are afraid to ask. That's what makes us human. That's what makes us special. Around them, the control room had fallen silent. Everyone watched as the old woman slowly collapsed, her body failing from the impossible journey she had made. "The galaxy needs you to succeed where I failed," she whispered. "Show them that humans can be trusted with power. Show them that our chaos is not our weakness, it's our strength." Present-day Sarah held her future self as the old woman's breathing slowed. 3 months had passed since the day everything changed. Sarah Chen stood in the same control room, but the view outside was very different now. The Kronos Gate was no longer alone in orbit. Surrounding it were dozens of ships. Human ships. Imperial ships. Research vessels from 100 different species, all working together on the most ambitious scientific project the galaxy had ever seen. "Dr. Chen," called out Martinez from his station, "we're receiving the latest data from the Imperial Science Division. They've confirmed our predictions about the temporal anomaly. We have about 180 years before it reaches inhabited space." "Plenty of time," Sarah said with a smile, "if we work together." It had not been easy to reach this point. After the death of future Sarah, the Emperor had called an emergency session of the High Council. The debate had lasted for weeks. Some council members still wanted to destroy Earth. Others argued for the complete ban on temporal research to remain in place. But the evidence future Sarah had brought could not be ignored. The temporal anomaly was real, and stopping it would require exactly the kind of temporal manipulation that humans had pioneered. In the end, Emperor Valthrin Namaith made a decision that shocked the galaxy. He proposed amending the founding laws of the Empire, not to remove all restrictions on temporal technology, but to create a new framework. One that allowed carefully controlled research under strict ethical oversight, and he asked humans to lead it. The vote was close, but it passed. Ambassador Marcus Webb now sat on the High Council itself, the first human to ever hold such a position. He worked tirelessly to build bridges between Earth and the hundreds of other species in the Empire. Sarah walked through the research complex that had been built adjacent to the Kronos Gate. Imperial scientists worked side by side with human researchers. The mix of species, perspectives, and approaches created exactly the kind of creative chaos that had led to humanity's breakthrough. She found Jason Torres in one of the labs, explaining human collaborative methods to a group of fascinated alien researchers. "And that's why we encourage disagreement," Jason was saying. "When everyone agrees too quickly, we might be missing something important. Healthy debate leads to better solutions." One of the aliens, a crystalline being named Shatara, shook her head in amazement. "This is so different from how we work. In my culture, disagreeing with a senior scientist is considered disrespectful." "Try it sometime," Jason suggested with a grin. "You might be surprised by the results." Sarah continued her walk, eventually arriving at the memorial that had been built near the gate. A statue of an elderly woman looking out at the stars. Beneath it, an inscription in both English and Imperial Standard read, "She gave her future so that ours could exist." Captain Lyria stood before the memorial, as she often did. The Imperial officer had requested a transfer to Earth, and now served as the military liaison between human and Imperial forces. "I come here every day," Lyria said without turning, "to remind myself why I'm doing this work." "She'd be proud," Sarah said softly. "The future she came from, that terrible timeline, it's been erased. We're creating something better." "I hope so," Lyria replied. "Admiral Kethro says the same thing, though he still worries sometimes that we're being too optimistic." Sarah smiled. "That's why we need both perspectives, your caution and our optimism. Together, we can find the right balance." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching ships move around the gate. On Throne Prime, Emperor Valthrin IX walked through the Imperial Gardens with Admiral Kethros. The ancient ruler moved slowly, his age showing more clearly now than it had in centuries. "You're thinking about the human," the Emperor observed. Kethros nodded. "The old one, the one who traveled back. I think about her sacrifice often." "As do I," the Emperor admitted. "She erased her own existence to save others. That kind of courage is rare, Admiral." "She proved something important, Your Majesty. She proved that humans can be trusted with power because they understand the weight of responsibility. The Emperor stopped walking and looked up at the sky. We have spent 100,000 years afraid of repeating the past, so afraid that we almost destroyed the very solution we needed for the future. The temporal anomaly would have killed us all. Kethros agreed. And now, because we chose to trust rather than destroy, we have a chance. Not just to survive, but to grow. The humans are teaching us things we had forgotten. How to think creatively. How to embrace chaos. How to question our assumptions. Some council members still object, Kethros mentioned. Of course they do. Change is frightening, but fear cannot be our only guide anymore. The Emperor resumed walking. I have ruled for over 2,000 years, Admiral. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have witnessed countless wars and disasters, but I have never seen anything quite like what is happening now. What do you mean, Your Majesty? Hope, the Emperor said simply. Real, genuine hope for the future. The humans brought that to us. They reminded us that the galaxy is not just something to be preserved and protected. It is something to be explored, questioned, and improved. Back on Earth, Sarah received a call from Professor Zenthar, the Empire's leading historian. He had spent the past 3 months studying human history and culture, trying to understand what made them unique. Dr. Chen, he said excitedly, I believe I've discovered something important, the key to human innovation. What is it? Sarah asked. Your species evolved on a planet with unusual environmental pressures, rapid climate changes, competing predators, complex social structures. You had to adapt constantly. You had to think creatively to survive. I'm not sure I follow. Other species in the Empire evolved in more stable environments. They developed intelligence, yes, but they optimized for consistency and hierarchy. Humans optimized for flexibility and innovation. You're literally built to handle chaos. Sarah considered this. So our strength comes from our evolutionary history? Partially, but there's more. Your cultural practices reinforce it. Your emphasis on education, on questioning authority, on valuing diverse perspectives. You've created societies that reward creative thinking even when it challenges the status quo. And that's why we succeeded with temporal technology. That's why you'll continue to succeed with many things, Dr. Chen. You represent something the Empire desperately needs, the ability to adapt, the courage to change. After the call ended, Sarah thought about the professor's words. She thought about her team, about the chaotic brainstorming sessions, about the arguments and debates that led to breakthroughs. She thought about the old woman from the future, who had given everything to ensure humanity survived. She realized that the Galactic Empire hadn't just spared humanity out of mercy. They had chosen to learn from humanity, and in doing so, they had opened themselves to transformation. 6 months after the crisis, the first joint human-imperial temporal research paper was published. It presented a comprehensive plan for countering the future temporal anomaly. The plan required technology that didn't exist yet, but the framework was solid. Scientists from across the galaxy began working on the problem. The Chronos Gate became a symbol not of fear, but of hope. What had almost started a war had instead started a revolution in how the Empire approached science and innovation. Sarah stood in the control room for another major test. This time they weren't sending a probe into the future. They were doing something much more ambitious. Initiating temporal stabilization field, announced the lead engineer. The Chronos Gate activated, but instead of creating a portal, it generated a stable field that could detect temporal distortions across vast distances. It was the first step toward building an early warning system for the anomaly. The test was successful. Data poured in from across the galaxy, mapping temporal currents and eddies that no one had ever detected before. It's working, breathed Martinez. We're actually doing it. Sarah allowed herself a moment of pride. Then she got back to work. There was still so much to learn, so much to build, so many questions to answer. But now they had time. And they had partners. Emperor Valthran IX made one final decision that surprised everyone. He announced that when the temporal anomaly finally arrived in 180 years, he would step down from the throne. Not because of failure, but because he believed the galaxy would need new leadership for a new age. I have ruled. During an age of stability and fear, he told the High Council. But the future will require courage and innovation. It will require leaders who were raised in this new era of cooperation between species. Leaders who learned from both imperial tradition and human creativity. Admiral Kethros, who had become one of the Emperor's closest advisors, asked the question everyone was thinking. "Who will lead us, Your Majesty?" The Emperor smiled, an expression that transformed his ancient features. "I don't know yet. Perhaps a human. Perhaps an imperial. Perhaps someone from a species we haven't even contacted yet. What matters is that they will be someone who understands what we have learned, that diversity is strength, that fear is not wisdom, that the future is not something to be feared but something to be created." On Earth, Sarah Chen celebrated her 50th birthday. Her hair was starting to gray, but her eyes were as bright and curious as ever. Her team threw a party in the control room, with humans and aliens mingling freely.